Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's professional development on PCI compliance. Once again, we have our guest, Brad Summer, here today. He's going to go over a lot of the stuff he's been learning about PCI. When I first met Brad and he started working with us, this was actually a topic that he was already kind of ahead of the game on. A lot of people, this is a topic a lot of people ignore for years. I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations with a lot of you guys on the call right now, and you were convinced that this whole PCI was just a scam, right? And that it was just either a scam from the networks or something that EPSG just pushes on you guys. And I hope some people would attest to the fact that I've always voiced that no, this is a real thing. Okay, we get pressure on all every other month from our our back ends, whether that be Deutsche or Wood Forest Bank, to get more and more people PCI compliant. The ratchet is just getting more and more tightened to the level of compliance and being necessary to be compliant, and that's going to come with a lot more uncomfortable situations for not only sales partners moving forward and also current merchants. So with that being said, I know Brad's been working on this presentation for a while, so without further ado, I'll let him take the floor and go over PCI compliance with you guys.
Morning, everybody. I don't know if excited is the right word, but I really am looking forward to going over this with all you guys. I was with a lot of you on the trip, and we talked a little bit about it. We have a very formal presentation, but before we do that, I want to just take a step back and touch upon some of the stuff that Jeff mentioned and why we're doing this. First, this is part of the professional development that I'm kind of heading up now. Everything we do, again, is to help you get accounts, retain accounts, improve referrals, and improve margin. It's not just a product discussion. So we're going to tie those 4 elements into everything we talk about. But before I go to the presentation, again, let's take a step back. Some of this you know, some of this you don't. So PCI, again, are regulations created by the card associations. Why do they do it? They do it to help prevent breaches and other things where they get expenses because of it. So the card associations are doing it for themselves, of course, to prevent breaches and other experiences where merchants get into trouble and they have to cover costs. So what have they done? They've created guidelines that they want every merchant to go through, which in and of itself is a good concept. But we all know, we've all tried to avoid this for lots of reasons. A, it's difficult. B, the merchants don't appreciate it. C, it's difficult. But let's walk through that. Let's demystify a lot of those things and make this a lot easier for you to help your merchants, and then go through why it's going to help you and them. First, let's go through a little more of how it impacts EPSG and you guys. So up until 2017, it was really just a recommendation. You really didn't have to do it. But why would you do it? First, because there may be non-compliance fees. So as of now, what? Your merchants who are not compliant are getting charged $40 a quarter. I'm sure you've gotten pushback on that, and that's an issue. So how can you avoid that from happening? By getting them compliant. We're going to walk you through how you do that. So number 1, it's because of non-compliance fees. 2, it's to protect your merchant. They're going to make it it's going to be much harder for them to get breached, and they're going to be much more protected if they ever do get breached, because then the card associations, they can defend against them. If you're not compliant, you can be fined and worse. Now, realistically, and I'm on your side, obviously, on everything we talk about, it doesn't happen a lot to the average merchant. I've never had it happen to one of my merchants. But when it does happen, you're going to be upset, and the merchant's going to be upset. So what can we do to help? And lastly, we're going to turn this whole thing around. If you walk them through this and help them, you're going to strengthen your relationship with every merchant. You're going to retain them because of it, and you're going to add some margin in the end. I literally, since I've been in EPSG, haven't lost one account, and it's not because I'm anything different than anyone else. I price things well, but not the best, and then I help them with PCI, with chargebacks, with other things that no one else is talking to their merchants about, so the relationship and the dynamic dynamics of my relationship with the merchants, I think, are different than the average person, and because of that, your retention rate goes through the roof. All right, so with that said, let's go through the presentation. So the introduction on page 3. So what changed this year? In January of 2017, level 4, which is the average smaller to mid-merchant, it went from being optional to strongly suggested. So what does that really mean? Well, let's take a step back. Up until then, it was only strongly suggested. I misspoke. Now it's mandated. What does that really mean, though, to you? We're not sure, to be honest with you. As of now, you could still not have your merchants be compliant, and nothing's really changed. So up till now, you still get the non-compliance fees, and you're still at risk if they get breached. At some point, partly because there'll be pressure on EPSG to have a much bigger percentage of their book compliant, and to you at the micro level of each merchant, at some point there could be more ramifications for them not being compliant. So if you push this off further, you're asking for more trouble and more work down the road. Okay, so let's walk through now what all your merchants are and what are the categories. There's non-activated. If you're non-activated, it means they're not a merchant yet of EPSG, so that's none of your merchants. There's activated, which is all EPSG merchants are activated and receive free breach protection of $50,000. Activated merchants receive quarterly non-compliance fees until they are registered and compliant. So let's walk you through right now something I just went through that's really, really important that I never really spoke about till recently. Every EPSG merchant has $50,000 of breach protection. I'm not sure if everyone knew that or not. That's something you should be leading with prospects and making sure every one of your merchants know. They're getting that for free. That's very powerful. So for the first $50,000 of any issues that could come up related to breach, EPSG is giving them free insurance. So you need to be conveying that to your merchants because you should be getting credit for it. So that's number one. Number 2, what is a registered merchant? Registered merchants are ones that have signed into the Trustwave portal. They're still getting non-compliance fees because they're not compliant yet. They're just registered. Then if you're compliant, you've completed the survey, which is a SAQ. You've done any scans if necessary and passed. Then you don't get any non-compliance fees anymore, and you're getting charged $4.95 a month at this point for being registered and compliant. Lastly, non-compliant merchants that have not achieved compliance or if compliance have lapsed. So those are all the definitions. Now let's really dig into it. First and foremost, again, I cannot reiterate enough that you should be conveying to every merchant that they're getting $50,000 of free breach protection. Again, I think that's very powerful. And right, so there's a great question. Theoretically, it's part of the $4.95, but even if they're not registered and getting charged the $4.95 yet, they're getting the breach protection, but under that circumstance, they're getting charged non-compliance fees. So you could theoretically argue that the $50,000 is part of the $4.95 or the $40 quarterly, but I wouldn't present it that way. I would present it that you're getting $50,000 of breach protection for being part of EPSG. In reality, it's getting covered somewhat by the $4.95 or the $40 non-compliance, but bottom line is you're giving the $50,000 of breach protection. Secondly, for now, under the product we have now, you're getting charged $4.95 to being part of Trustwave, and if you're not registered and compliant, they're getting charged $40 a quarter for being non-compliant. Let's talk about that for a second. I know there's been a lot of different views on that. You know, it's not great, right? You're getting charged, your merchant's getting charged $40 a quarter, and they're not happy about it. Why is EPSG doing it? And again, I'm on your side. I'm not here to defend EPSG, but there's a lot of pressure on them to have a much higher percentage of compliant merchants because they have a mandate as a ISO, as a processor, to have a program in place and to be promoting the program. And that's why this is in here as a motivation, really, for their sales force, meaning you guys, to go through this and get their merchants compliant. But that's the reality of it as of now. Why should you guys care? First and foremost, again, everything we talk about as part of professional development is to change your role with your merchants from a race to the bottom on price to being their advisor. And the more things you talk to them about besides price, where you help them, or at least try to help them, because some of these things, they may not end up helping themselves. But by talking to them about these things, you look more learned in the field, you show your knowledge, and you show your support and help for your merchants instead of just talking about price. And I promise you, even when someone comes in to try to undercut you by a little bit, they're not going to leave you because of all these things you're doing that someone else isn't doing. And at the same time, when you're talking to prospects and you talk about all these different things like this, instead of just price, you're going to win a lot more business because they're going to say, no one else is talking to me about these things. Two, again, for the third time, you're leading with or discussing that you're giving them $50,000 of breach protection. Next, and this again is why it's in there, you're helping them run and protect their business. Again, in most cases, this is not going to happen, but every now and then someone gets breached, and if you're a small to mid-sized business, instead of a Target, you don't have the funds to be shut down on credit cards or pay these fees. And by going through these small steps we're going to go through over the next 3 meetings, you're going to help them protect their business. Because if they go through this and do it right and they get breached, they really are protected. And to obviously avoid it as well. And the next thing is avoid fines. People who get breached, and Jeff, you can talk about this, you can be fined by Visa and MasterCard for not going through all this and doing the right things. Get to that in a second. Next and most tangible, by doing this or helping them do this, you're avoiding the $40 a quarter. A, that saves them money, it gives you goodwill, and lastly, it's one of the things I know when people come in, they try to use this as a reason for someone else to try to steal the business. Add margin. Let's go through this now and we'll go through it again later. Under the current pricing of $4.95, depending on what your Schedule A is, there's as much as $2, even a little more profit. And for you guys out there that have small, medium, or big size books, do the math. You know, every 100 accounts, let's say you have $2 of profit, that's another $200 or some percentage of $200 of monthly profit to you. That's a couple grand a year. I don't know about you guys, but I value every dollar. And to prove, you know, my conviction behind this, I've spent the last month, you know, to be honest, sales have been a little slow the last month for me personally. And I've gone through and we registered about 90 accounts. So in my mind, that's $150 to hopefully soon $200 of monthly income in my pocket while doing the right thing for my merchants. And I think that's very powerful. And then again, by doing all these different things, you're going to get more accounts. You're going to definitely retain your accounts. You're going to have another reason. And when I went through and registered all these people, met with them or on the phone, I got some referrals out of it and certainly asked for it. It's, you know, we all try to call our merchants and hope we can get referrals, but we don't have any reason we're calling them. Here's another reason to strengthen the relationship and ask for referrals. And at the same time, like I said, I've added $150 to $200 myself this last month. That's like a couple of accounts by just doing the right thing. I'm going to get through a couple questions now, but both these questions are going to get answered through the rest of the presentation. So one person's asked, a lot of merchants don't have the time and don't understand the questions. Also, some don't even have access to a computer. So we sit down and answer the questions for them. Great question. I'm going to answer it, you know, directly and honestly. So obviously you should not be doing them 100% yourself for them, either because they don't have a computer or because they just can't answer the questions. But, and I'm going to speak from experience, and we're going to go through all this and you're going to become just as knowledgeable as me. I know how to answer the surveys. I've gone through them with dozens and dozens of merchants. I know how to answer the questions correctly. I know the ones that are difficult that they're not sure how to help them answer. And the ones I can't, at least we can walk through and decide how we're going to answer them to the best of our ability, as well as talk through the survey and so forth. And in the rest of this presentation and the second one, I'm going to walk you through almost every type of merchant, how to help them. And again, by doing this, you're adding goodwill. A lot of them will get through the process and get registered and compliant. And even the ones who don't, at least you tried and you added goodwill and helped them. So to answer that question, by the end of if you listen to these 3 presentations, you're going to be in a position to really help them get these registered and compliant. The other question is, when you said you registered, what does that mean? I thought the merchant had to do the questionnaire. So same thing. I help them do it because they don't do it because they're overwhelmed. I go to their place of business or on the phone with them. We both sign in, and I go through it with them. We also call in, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I help them get them done. And that's, you wouldn't have to go back on the slide, but just in the third slide, I have the phone number and the link to Trustwave. There it is. So you ever have a question or the merchant has a question, you call that phone number. And the next is the link to either register or to go through it. And we're going to go through, I have pictures of all of this, but those are the two things you should have on your desk or on your phone. And that's what you're going to help your merchants go through. So I hope that answered some of your questions. The next page, we're not going to go through in detail here because we're going to go through the specific pictures. It kind of walks you through the pre-registration process, the reminders that the merchant gets, the welcome when they become active, the fails when the scales when the scales fail, and when you have to re-register. And they're getting inundated with these emails and they don't know what they are. So by us going through them and you now understanding them, you can remind them, you're going to get this email from Trustwave. When you get it, forward it to me, and then I'm going to go through it with you. Some of you may not want to do this. That's what I do. And again, I think you get tremendous goodwill and penetration because of it. But at least you're going to tell them, you're going to get this email now. You need to go through this. And if you want to spend the time to go through it with them, you do that too. So we're going to go through the timeline of all of this. So great question, but just be a little patient now. So we're going to go to the next one. So as soon as your customer, your merchant, becomes an EPSG merchant, they're going to get this next slide. Okay? This is basically what they get, and they're invited to sign up with Trustwave because they're an EPSG customer. So if they click on that Get Started, later I'm going to show you what it's going to go to. But that's going to be this is the first email they get as soon as they become an EPSG customer. The next one is the reminder. This is going to keep reminding them to register. So they keep getting basically the same email over and over again, reminding them to register. You can either tell them to do it, or you can say, when you get this, forward this to me. I'm going to help you try to do it. And then you're going to explain to them all the things we've already discussed as to why this is important. You're going to get pushback sometimes. It's going to be up to you how to educate them and explain to them why it's important to do it. I know a little tricky point, also stepping back for a second, is the $40 non-compliance. Obviously, I know from a sales perspective, you think maybe they're not looking at their statements, so they don't see this. And that is a delicate topic, right? So if you really believe they don't know they're getting charged $40 and a quarter, you may not want to highlight that to them, but at the same time, you want to go through this. And obviously the ones they're getting this, you're explaining this is one of the many reasons why they should be going through it. The question saying they've never got the email. If they are putting the email on the application, they're getting the email. It could be going to spam, but they're getting the email. And if they're not getting it, you should call the EPSG support, and they will confirm it, and they'll connect with Trustwave, and they'll make sure it gets sent out again. Okay? Back to the next slide. So when you hit that Get Started, this is the screen they're going to get. I do help my merchants with this screen. This helps them get registered. You're not answering the questions. This is you're putting the company name, and I'm going into Epic. This is a little finicky. You have to put in the exact name. So I'm literally copying the DBA or the legal name, and I think it'll be either one, from Epic, and putting that in and the merchant ID. Because I think you should let your merchants try to do this, but if not, you can help them put that in to register. And they're putting in, this name can be any name. Doesn't have to be the name on EPSG, but the name who's going to be dealing with getting registered and compliant. And that's who they put in here as the first, last name. This part doesn't have to be the owner. That's the person handling this. We have a few more questions. One person asked how quickly they get it. It's not an exact science, but it's pretty quickly after they become a full EPSG merchant. Just give me 1 second, guys. So one person asked, and this is, let's clarify, Trustwave is the leader, which is great, and that's why we should sell that we're using the best in the business. But to someone's point, most quality processors are using Trustwave. Why does this help make it sticky is the question. It's a great question. The answer is the majority of merchants aren't compliant, and the salespeople out there aren't promoting, educating, or helping their merchants become compliant through Trustwave. So by doing that, you're different than most. If someone is compliant already and they're knowledgeable on this, certainly that's not an extra plus, but then you're just doing what they're already doing and like you're already showing them that you can do the same thing in those cases. But in the cases that they're not compliant, which is many, that's why I'm talking about all those other things. For example, I'm working on this very big one, and PCI is very important to them, and they are compliant. So in that case, to Michael's point, who asked the question, I'm just showing them that we can do everything they're doing already, maybe a little more because we can customize a few things here and there. But in general, that's just the status quo. But in most cases, they're not doing it. Someone else was asking. All right, so we have two really good questions, and I'm going to hold off on answering them because a lot of these are going to get answered in the rest of the presentation. So I don't want to get sidetracked for the moment. So just be patient. So this is the registration page. This gets them registered. Once they go through this, the only pitfall here again is if the company name or merchant ID is not correct, it's going to not register. If the merchant does that and they explain that to you, you need to then help them make sure the company name and merchant ID is exact. If that still doesn't work, then you got to call support. But in 99 out of 100 times, they're just not putting in the exact company name or the merchant ID correct. So that's the first pitfall to realize merchants sometimes do wrong. You need to help them with it. But once this gets done right, then the next stage happens. So here, they're going to ask now some questions, which again, you can help them with, but this is certainly part of the easy part of it. They're asking, how do you take credit cards? Are you a website? Are you mail, telephone, or you're in person? We're going to focus in the second part of the series in real detail on this stuff, but it could be more than one of these. So if you're using a terminal but once in a while you take stuff on the phone, you're going to hit in person on the phone, or one or the other. And if you're obviously e-commerce, you're going to hit website. You'll hit the appropriate 1, 2, or 3, and you hit next. Good questions, guys. I will get to it again in a minute. All right, this is the next page. Right now, we're just going through registration. Here's where they're going to create their own login. They're going to put in a username, a password, and then they're going to have 3 security questions. Those security questions are important only because if they have any problems with getting logged in or when they call in for questions, they're going to ask them this. I'm going to give you a trick that I do. And again, I'm not saying everyone's going to do this. Up until now, I'm still helping my merchants get registered. You could create this part for them. Everything after this they need to do. But up until now, to promote registration, you can help them. If you do it, you're going to put a username and password. I put 3 security questions in with the same answer. All questions like, where were you married? Where will your parents meet? Things like that. And I always put the same answer for all 3. The town that the merchant does business in, so they'll remember it. And I let them know that. I have a spreadsheet with all the logins, so I'll always have it. And I'm just trying to make the user experience easier for them if they don't do it themselves. Up until here, you can help them with, and they're going to have to do it. Then you register, and you go to the next question. Once you hit the next, now you're going to go here. This is just explaining some things to you. You hit next. You get to the next page. Here's where you always want to stay. The default is step-by-step recommended. Where it is already here, you're going to just hit next. You don't want to go to the expert level form. It's more difficult. Go to next screen. And they're going to say, boom, this is confirmation that you're registered. You've created an account. They're going to get this next. Okay? And it's going to say you're now an active registered user. You're not compliant, but you're registered. Okay. I'm going to get to a few of the questions now. Did you have the old question? Okay. So a few people asked, I know Jeff, I think, answered one of the questions, but again, on Epic, I think you can use either mid I've been using actually more of the 146 mids. I think you can use either one, and you can use the DBA or legal, but it's got to be exact. Somehow it's not working and it's exact, then try the other one. But I've tried either one, and I think they actually both work. Okay. So now we're up to, okay, so Melanie just confirmed with me you can use either. So again, it's either the 146 or the newer one, and it can be DBA or legal, mix and match, but it's got to be exact. Okay. So now you're registered, but you haven't done the SAQ. The SAQ is basically just the survey, but it's got a lot of questions in it. Okay? So now you're going to go through that, and then there's a bunch of emails of whether you've passed or failed that. And that's what this page is about. But we're going to go through the exact examples on the next few pages. So if you're not complete, it's going to show that you're incomplete, and you're going to keep getting that. You get inundated with that. That's what this one is for. If you're walking your merchants through it, they're going to tell you that something's failing. But if they do it on their own, you need to convey to them, you're going to get something saying that it's complete or that it's incomplete. If it's incomplete, call me or call Trustwave, depending on how you want to handle your merchants. Go to the next page. This is going to say that you're non-compliant. And once again, that means something failed in the SAQ, meaning the survey that has to be completed. Go to the next page. It's going to keep reminding them that something's failing in the assessment. Once you're done with these series of calls with me, this isn't going to happen because you're going to help them get through the SAQ and pass, but this is what they're going to keep getting if they fail. I think the next one's going to show if you pass. So here you go. So this is going to say that you've passed the SAQ, and then the only other question is going to be whether there's scans that have to be done in a second. But this is the page they need to get to say they've passed the SAQ or the survey. And I know someone's going to ask you this in a minute. We're going to, in the second series of these calls, help you know how to help your merchant pass the SAQ. And we'll go through it a little bit today in more detail next time. Okay, next one. So now let's talk about scans for a second because I know this overwhelms everybody. I'm going to steal a little of my own thunder for the next presentation, but I know these are all the questions people are going to have. Okay? I'm going to go through the basic merchants now and who needs a scan and who doesn't. If someone has a terminal that's on a phone line, you do not need a scan. And the SAQ survey is very simple. It just goes through a bunch of questions saying do you take credit card information? Do you save it? Is it secure? Do you destroy it? Do you have programs in place to educate your employees? Things of that nature with no scan. Very simple. We'll go through more of it next meeting, but that's terminal phone. Terminal IP, believe it or not, because it's IP, it's internet related. It creates a much more complicated SAQ and it warrants a scan. I'm going to walk you through and demystify a lot of this. The one thing you need to get from the merchant or they need to put in is the IP address. I'm going to give you some more tricks. If they know the IP address or not. A lot of them do, a lot of them don't. If they have a computer in the office, they can go to a site called ipchicken.com. I know it's funny, but it'll give them the IP address to then put in for the scan or for you to help them put in for the scan. So that's those two type of merchants. If you're a gateway merchant, you're using USA ePay or one of the other ones, and that's the only way they're doing business, you do not have to do a scan, which I never knew. My merchants would keep failing these things. I didn't know how to help them. And with Melanie's help, and I've been speaking to Trustwave a lot the last month, you do not have to do a scan. The SAQ survey is a little more difficult because there is some internet questions, but there's no scan required. It makes it a lot easier for them to pass them. Next meeting, we're going to go through that more. Lastly, if it's e-commerce, they have to put in the e-commerce address, and then there's a scan done on that. So that's that. Next, you're going to see a series of the next bunch. This is letting them know that a scan is scheduled. So basically, when the SAQ is passed, this is going to let them know that a scan is going to be done, and this is letting them know that. Next one. This is telling you that the scan passed, and then we're done, and we're great. But unfortunately, sometimes, the next one, the scan's failing. This is where it gets a little more complicated. Because let's be honest, the average small merchant doesn't have a huge IT staff. And there's going to be lots of things mentioned here as to why they're failing. We certainly don't want this to have happen, but it's going to happen sometimes. And this is where you're going to have to ask your merchant if they have any IT person who's on board or at least supports them. And Trustwave and them are going to have to talk and try to prevent the scans. Or not prevent them, I'm sorry, solve the scans. But even if you can't, you've done your job of helping them. And at this point, you could talk to them and explain, you should have someone help resolve this. We can call Trustwave and try to resolve it. But if not, at least you're aware now that there may be some vulnerabilities in your network that probably will never come up as an issue. But my job is to help you realize that there is some risk now of breach. Probably not going to happen, but at least you're informing them and explaining them. And maybe they'll think it's worth it then to get someone involved, or maybe not. And then you can remind them again here that you have $50,000 of breach protection at this point, and you look like the hero and the person trying to help and protect them. Okay? Okay. This is just, again, a chart. They're going to keep getting reminded that their scan is failed, or their SAQ is failed or expired. And then this one goes into more detail about expiration, which is the last part of this presentation, which is if they've passed, a year from now, it's going to expire. And then they're going to have to, they don't have to redo the whole thing, but they're going to have to just re-up so they don't expire. And let me take one step back because I know I'm talking a little fast. Well, let me answer a question first. So if a scan fails, but the SAQ passed, they are non-compliant. We're going to walk through in the next meeting, again, doing everything possible to avoid the fail or to make sure a scan isn't even needed. But when it is needed and it fails, we have to help them cure it. Okay. So one last thing on scans. They get done, I think, automatically quarterly. So when they, I'm sorry, monthly. So when they pass the first one, every month they're going to get an update saying you passed your scan. Every now and then, but almost never, something could change and they could fail it, and then you're going to have to go through that with them. But again, you're reminding them they're being protected every month by us through Trustwave by getting a scan. Again, bigger merchants are going to need this. Smaller ones are going to look at it more of a nuisance, and you're going to at least educate them. And at the end, we're going to talk about that a little further. Let's finish with expiration for now, though. So a year later, they have to re-up. That's why I recommend, if you're able to do it, and I'm not so great with Excel myself even, but I now have an Excel spreadsheet with the username, password, and security answers, so that when this comes up in a year, inevitably a lot of your merchants say, I don't remember my login information, and you're going to have to help them go through that and waste your time. If you have this in a spreadsheet, it's clockwork and easy. And remember, it's to help them and for you to keep getting paid on it. Okay? So remember, on the spreadsheet, you can also put when they did this. So I'm putting now June, so I know next May to remind my merchants who registered in June that they're going to have to re-up. And it's really basically just answering one or two questions and to avoid expiration. Because if it expires, then you have to go through the whole thing again. They're going to get a series of emails letting them know that they're going to expire or have expired. And we'll go through those next few slides, Jeff, that show you what those look like. So this is reminding them that it's going to expire soon. This is getting sent within 60 days of expiration, within 45, within 30, within 15, within 7, within 1. I think that's enough notice. Next one. This lets them know, again, it just keeps reminding them. So this is the 30-day notice. Next one. This is letting them know they've expired, and they're going to be reminded every 2 weeks for 6 months that they've expired. Next one. This is, again, what the example of it. Every 2 weeks, they're going to be reminded they're expired. Okay. All right, let's take a step back now. You know, this is a lot of material that a lot of you haven't learned before, so I want you to soak it in. This will all be on Epic and EPSG University in the near future if you need to listen to it again. But what's the takeaways from today? You're gonna now be able to at least put your merchant on notice when they get these emails, what they need to do. You're gonna ahead of time educate them as to why this is important, make you look like a hero and knowledgeable, and why it should be done. It's going to have you communicate more with the merchants, which is always a good thing. I know some people think it brings up some sensitive topics, but it's always better to be having a direct dialogue. 1 second, I have a question. Is it possible for us to get a reminder email along with the merchant? I don't think so, but we will check and get it out to you. That's, again, more the reason why you should have this in a spreadsheet with when they registered, so you know when they're going to get this and give them notice ahead of time, which is, again, 11 to 12 months after they registered. So that's answering that question. Taking a step back again, you now know how to navigate through this with them so they understand how to do it and why they should do it. At the same time, you need to be promoting the $50,000 of insurance and why this protects them. Of course, the byproduct of this is the non-compliance fees go away. I'm going to leave it to your judgment whether you need to be promoting that or not. If they don't know about it, I'm certainly not saying anything other than that you use your discretion whether you want to let them know that this goes away or not. But in the end, it does go away. We got a few more questions. Okay. So first question is, can EPSG send ISOs a list of our merchants that are and are not compliant? Jeff's gonna have his support group take a look at this and get back to everyone on this as to what they can do and what they can't do and how much work it requires. One trick related to that, I don't know how much you guys review your book, but when you look through the statements, if the $495 is not being charged, they're not registered and compliant. So that's one backdoor way to know that. It's not the most efficient, but that's one thing that I do at this point. But we'll work on that and get back to you at the next meeting, which I think is later in the week or next week. If there's no email on file when this is added, will merchant get the Trustwave email automatically? We'll confirm the answer on that, but I think once an email is added, then it will go out. But I think the more important question is when you don't have an email, it can't go out. So it's actually a reason to almost make it mandatory to have an email on the original merchant app, because then to have to deal with this later creates uncertainty. But I'm pretty sure the answer is if you add it later, it will then go out. But whether you have to be proactive or not, we'll double check on that. Another question is, are older merchants that were boarded before the PCI requirements notified of PCI? Haven't we been on this program for many years? Yes. I think, Richard, we've been on this program for many years, so that I think anyone who, by definition, is an EPSG merchant is part of this program. But if there's anyone in particular that's very old that you want us to confirm, we certainly can do that.
Plus, there's regular statement messages that go out about PCI too. So we don't have the email, and they're not getting notified by Trustwave. There are statement messages.
So these are all great questions, and Melanie just pointed out another way that we're trying to get the word out to the merchants. But I'm going to take a step back again. What is reality? Reality is the sales force has not promoted this to a large detail, and the merchants are busy doing their business. And by definition, our percentage of merchants who are compliant are very low. That's just the reality. Why are we doing this today and this week and this month? Because we think, and I think as a salesperson, it's your responsibility to be connecting with your merchants and helping them become compliant, or at least giving them the tools to do it. And then if they don't do it, then it's their fault. And by definition, I think by far the majority of merchants are not compliant. That's just reality. It's well in the majority. So that's what I did this last month. I've touched over half my book and got them registered and compliant and spoke to them about it. I I don't know about you, but merchants don't always call you back. They're calling me back on this. So you make it important. You remind them about the insurance we're giving. So I know some of you think, I don't think this is worth it. It's another reason to tell them about the insurance that they don't even know they have that you're giving them. So you do look like you're in a strong position of helping them and supporting them. And then the tougher part is worth going through. The biggest issue is the scan and the survey. And the next meeting, I'm going to help you become more knowledgeable. Again, the merchant has to be involved, but you can help them get through this, which I think has been the biggest obstacle. What is our responsibility if a merchant says they don't care? It's a great question. I think I've kind of answered it, but I answer it again. Your responsibility and to your benefit is to educate them as to what PCI is, what the consequences are if they get breached, not to scare them. And you can tell them the likelihood of being breached as a small merchant is pretty low. But if they get breached, there's potential fines and shutdowns of the ability to access credit cards. That's not your rule. That's the association's rule. You're on their side, and you have to convey that to them. And you can tell them it's mandatory now, but with no consequence if they don't get breached. But the consequence is they're not protecting their business, and they're not. And again, they're getting charged quarterly, which again, I'm leaving completely to you how you want to treat that. But I promise you, if someone comes in and reviews their statement and they see the non-compliance fees, you're at risk. So it's just another selfish reason why you should be going through this. The biggest reasons people haven't done this is because they were overwhelmed and scared. And it's human nature. When you don't understand something, you avoid it. I hope today is the first in a three-step process to educate you enough to be familiar with it enough to at least help your merchant do it on their own. And if you really take this to heart, you can actually review it with them. So I'm going to let Jeff answer that question. The next question is, have we seen any breaches in the whole book in the last 12 months?
It's a great question, definitely. Actually, in the last 12 months, the answer is no. However, we have had some breaches, and believe it or not, really the majority of breaches, I think a lot of times people think these big breaches like happened to Heartland or happened to Target, and they think about these kind of, Eastern European, hackers, going into these big systems. Well, the truth of the matter is, 80 to 90% of breaches tend to happen. It's an inside job. It's a server that steals credit card numbers. It's an admin that takes down information and stuff like that. So I think really the small ones are really the ones that are the scariest, because no matter what happens, if a breach has been deemed a breach has happened, the first thing that has to happen is an investigation and a forensic investigation, which is going to cost the merchant upwards of $5,000 right out of the gate. So, and that's not even the fine that might happen as a result of the PCI. That's strictly just to do the forensic investigation. So we're talking about some big, not only fines, but big ticket items rather that that can put a lot of small businesses out of business.
And Jeff, again, it's not just those fines. It's they can't take credit cards for a while. So most businesses can't exist without taking credit cards. But going back to that, in the surveys, I was going to bring this up, and Jeff already just answered it. A lot of businesses, it's businesses that are saving credit card numbers, that then a disgruntled employee or an unethical employee then takes the number and uses it. That's as much or a bigger risk than technological breach. And when I have that conversation with merchants, they actually appreciate it and they understand it. And again, you're then not talking about pricing. You're not just a credit card guy. You're an advisor to their business. That part's actually a really good part of the survey to go over with your merchants. The only tricky part, which we're going to help you in the next presentation, is when it comes to the internet and firewall questions and things like that. And you can learn enough to help them answer it to some degree. Trustwave's there to help answer to another degree. And then the merchant will have to answer it to some degree. But between all three of those players, almost all surveys can get completed. And then again, the scans that have to be done get done. Most of them pass. Once in a while there's a fail. And again, the biggest revelation I had that I'm glad I'm able to pass along to you is now, because I know a lot of you have gateway merchants. They really don't need scans, and I'm going to show you how to do it, which has been a lifesaver for me because those are the ones I was actually helping them do wrong. And Trustwave, I didn't utilize them enough, and now I know how to help them answer that so they don't have to do a scan and they still get compliant. So with that said, unless there's any more questions, I hope you took away enough here to understand more, to be able to have the conversation with the merchant, not only why, but how. And the next one, we're going to dig deeper into the surveys themselves and how to help the merchant understand them and how to answer. Here's one more question. The scan doesn't protect them from storing data on an Excel spreadsheet. It does open the conversation to moving them to a gateway lockbox, and we make money there. So again, great point. All of these things are just educating the merchant and helping them understand what technology works for them. Some people are always going to use a terminal. Some are going to realize that a gateway is a much better way to do business, and they can still have a card present option as well. A lot of merchants and maybe salespeople don't even realize that USAP and these other gateways allow you to have a recurring or stored client data option. I have a large physical therapy chain that was always just using terminals, and they were almost going to leave to some kind of POS system. And then I offered USAP Pay, and I offered you use the recurring option, even though they don't have recurring billing, but they use it as a saved client option, and that they now have over 1,500 patients saved in their various sites, and they love it, and it's a very reasonably inexpensive option, and it locks them in. For them to leave now, not only because I think we did a good job, but it would be very difficult. So those are all other reasons that this allows you to help your merchant explore other options, not just PCI related, and strengthen your relationship with them. So I hope this was helpful, and please attend the next one. The next one, we're going to dig deeper so that you can actually go to your merchant and help them do this. And again, I know some of you don't realize this yet, but the biggest takeaway is your relationship with your merchants is going to be strengthened, and your retention rate is going to go from 50% to 70%, from 70% to 80%, from 90 to 99. And that's what professional development is all about, and that's what we're trying to do to help you. So thank you.
Awesome, Brad. Thank you guys very much for everybody. There's a couple things I just wanted to elaborate on. A couple things that, I wanted to touch on definitely was about the mandate and kind of really what that meant. I think Brad hit it on the nose. And although it has become a mandate and it hasn't been really enforced at this point, I assure you that enforcement is coming down the line. And, an extreme version of that would be the merchant's not going to be able to process anymore. Let's just be realistic. Not many banks are going to be okay with stopping that credit card volume until it becomes an extreme mandate. And, that could be years down the line. However, in my opinion, and this is strictly opinion because we haven't seen this come down the line, but the first step to making something more of a mandate is to start charging more for non-PCI compliance fees. So that $39.50 quarterly, it's my estimation that the first move to mandate this is going to increase that non-compliance fee. So it's imperative that we don't take the kind of non-enforced mandate, as reprieve to kind of take a breath and procrastinate on this, right? It's a great option to be able to get these guys through. With our new PCI products, there's even more revenue in these deals moving forward. So it's imperative that we don't take that lightly.
Let me just add one thing, Jeff, on that note. So the third part of the presentations is going to be more about the mandate and the new product offerings that Melanie's working on. I'm going to position this on two sides for you guys, and again, I'm in the field doing the same thing. The new products are going to be so much more robust, offer so much more in terms of protection, malware, antivirus, which is amazing. And where this world's going certainly is where it's going. And a lot of us are not, 20 years old, and we need to step up and move with the world. But it is going to have a higher price point because it's offering so much more, and it should. So with that said, you need to go through your book now and decide for your merchants that are maybe less sophisticated, don't need all of these options, and this current product offering, which we haven't taken advantage of, is the better product. You need to do that now. So I'm going to give you a catalyst to work on that part of your book now, because once these new products come, this older system we have is going to go away. It's going to be grandfathered for everyone who's using it, but it's not going to be part of the product offering because it's not robust enough. So that's a reason now to get on the phone once we get through these 3 webinars and start going to work on the ones that you think should be part of this product line. With that said, the new product lines, because of the antivirus and the malware, a lot of the questions get answered for you because they've already satisfied the requirements. So it actually proves how good the new products are going to be. So that's something to be excited about as well.
Definitely, yeah. So another couple items I wanted to touch on, guys, is really generally speak about your role in this compliant steps, okay? Now, I'm always a firm believer. I always, service my merchants heavily, and I encourage everyone on the call to do so. But I want to make it very clear, that there's certain roles and certain questions, and there's reasons why companies like Trustwave and their competitors are not used to having sales partners in the middle of these questions, and there's security reasons for that. You never want to put yourself in a position where you answer a question for a merchant incorrectly, and the result of that answer could be a breach or something like that. Okay, I know that's an extreme example, but it's imperative that you get involved and assist these merchants to do so, but know your role, right? Not only from a security perspective, but a technology perspective as well. I don't want to judge. There's some new people on the call. I don't know them very well. Some of you guys might have an IT support background. But when it starts getting into firewalls and updates and the security features of their computers and stuff like that, you don't want to be the person making those decisions. I assure you. You are an independent third party in this relationship, and it's fine that you assist them, but please keep in mind you don't want to paint yourself in a corner. As well as some of the great tips Brad gave about and getting people pre-registered and keeping a spreadsheet of these passwords and these information. I think it's a great tip. However, I'm sure a lot of you have heard me before. It's the same answer as if you're keeping merchant applications at your office, home office, or storing them on your computer. Make sure, for the same reason as these breaches happen, that you're protecting that information as well. It's very easy. It's an easy Google search to figure out how to encrypt files and put a password protection on some of these files that you save on your PC. Again, you don't want to be the reason why passwords are hacked and for one of your merchants. So please, if you're going to store these information, please store them securely and properly to make sure that you're not the weak point here. Okay, so please know your role in this. It's going to serve everybody, including the merchant, to be able to assist these people, these merchants, through these steps. But make sure you're assisting, not doing for them. Right? It's very, very important to understand the difference there. Okay. Another great point I wanted to elaborate on is, I think it was Richie Mazo who mentioned that some merchants say they didn't get the email. Look, guys, this is something that we deal with regularly. It's just like with chargebacks. They didn't get the letter, right? Of course they did. I assure you they get the email. If there's an email on file, they get it, okay? It might be go to a junk file or something like that, or maybe they don't check their emails. But obviously, you never want to get in an argument with your merchant about this. So my suggestion is to always if they have an approved merchant ID number with us, the email went out, I can almost guarantee you, okay? However, a very quick follow-up to ISO support, and we can very easily get the most recent one resent to them, and then you can ask them to check their junk folder, and I assure you that can be tracked down very, very quickly. We actually had another couple questions about the use of which merchant ID number to use, okay? So something you notice is that you can use either one. Just to emphasize that, if you guys didn't get that, for Trustwave you can use either one, the 146, which is the newer ones, and also the 2746 that are kind of the older ones. However, just generally speaking, even beyond Trustwave, guys, okay, I strongly suggest that this answer is always the new mid, okay, and that goes along with everything. Now, if you look at Epic, you look at a lot of the systems we use, both mids are absolutely used, accessible, with the exception of Wood Forest. Thank you, Richie. I will get to that. I can always trust you to poke some holes in my statements. I appreciate that. However, when it comes to the EPSG, the Evo backend boarded merchants, okay, the only reason we have 2 mids is because we're still kind of in the tail end of the transition period to a new backend, okay? There's various reasons internally why we need both of those merchant ID numbers. However, you can pretty much access any system that you have access to using either one of the mids, but my suggestion and my guidance would be to start weaning yourself off of the 2746 number, because eventually they will not be working, okay, or well, they'll always work, but they'll eventually not be a variable here, okay? We are going to move towards the 146, and I suggest everybody kind of getting used to that and really leveraging that for any of the issues that you need.
One last thing I forgot, guys. For those of you that have a chain of merchants who have several locations, there are some ways to link them together. I don't want to go into all the details today, but if you have someone who has 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 locations and they're doing business the same way at all of them, it's possible to potentially chain them and have to register all of them, and we can help you with that in those specific case-by-case basis. Thanks.
So last thing I just wanted to emphasize about Woodforest, guys. So currently our agreement with Woodforest, they actually have their own PCI product, and we actually are in the works for bigger things than just PCI to become what you call a wholesale provider for Woodforest, which is going to allow us to have access that we don't have now. Things like, even the simple file builds. I'm sure some of you guys can attest to the fact that sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome to get stuff and requests done through Woodforest applications. And trust me, nobody knows that more than us. We're used to moving, agile and being able to, update these files and everything. And we're not able to do that currently, but we're a couple months away from actually having the same type of access to Woodforest as we do at Evo. So we're gonna, it's gonna make things much easier. In addition to that, is we'll be able to provide our own PCI product at that time. But currently, Woodforest actually has their own policy, and I'm sure we can, kind of elaborate on that here in the near future. Still got some more questions coming in, guys. So everybody just sit tight. Jeff, I'd love to talk to you about offline about that. It shouldn't be happening that way, but I assure you we can address that. And yes, Dallas is aware, guys. Dallas, who does our tech support, our level 1 tech support, at least for our, kind of Verifone and various outlets or various products. They are fully aware that we have ours. Keep in mind, it's a very big call center. As you well know, sometimes some people, it might not trickle down to the newbies as much as some of the veterans, but I assure you that the management down there definitely are aware that we have our own PCI product, and please make us aware if that's not being translated to your merchants.
Make sure you take the phone number and the link from the one of the initial pages of the presentation. That's how you communicate with them or give to your merchants that information.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think that that's going to be it for today. And please don't forget to register for the next training. Keep your eye open for the training schedule, and make sure you're registered for the next 2, because again, as Brad has already alluded to, we're going to start going over the actual details of that scan and the QSR and and all the details on how to really become a master on this stuff. So with that being said, everybody have a great rest of the week, and if we don't have any other questions, let's go.